Hello, my name is Chris Reisig, and I'm an operating partner with Jungle Ventures, and I'm based here in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States of America. Thanks for spending some time with me today to talk about how to expand into the United States market. I wanted to spend a few minutes today talking about a topic that I hear come up quite frequently among the founders in Asia that I support in our portfolio. And that topic is how to decide when it's appropriate to approach the US market. And there are a lot of factors that go into that decision. And I'd like to get into a discussion about really when should a founder consider coming to the US market. And so when I think about the factors that play into that decision, there are a few pretty critical elements that I find need to be considered. And so I advise our founders to think about the following. Number one, if you have a viable business in Asia already, it's important to step back and look at the overall total addressable market throughout the world. And if your business is one where the market in Asia is massive and you can grow your business for years to come without ever having to leave that market, then I think you have to ask yourself, is it really worth the operational risk to start in another market? Many technologies in certain sectors like fintech or real estate property tech or other technology sectors, traditional SaaS, the US is just such a massive market for consumption of those technologies that sometimes it needs to be considered whether or not to go into the US market. And so one of the things I think you need to look at is the total addressable market. And as a rule of thumb, if the total addressable market in the US is more than kind of 40% of the global market, then in general terms, you sort of have to think about at some point getting into that market. And there are some markets where the US TAM is 50 or 60%, and in that case, it seems obvious. So that's one. The other is, are you seeing organic traction in the US? In other words, are US companies coming to your website? Are they asking to see demos of your product? Are they engaging with your team already? If that's the case, then that's a pretty good indicator that there's a market opportunity in the US. The other element I look for is, are customers in the APAC region bringing you into their US entities or US partners or US subsidiaries? If that's the case, that's yet another indicator. Then I think you have to step back and consider, are there any barriers to entry in the US that are sort of organic barriers within our company? So do we have a language barrier in terms of support? Are there any product issues with regard to the UI or how the product is used that are different in the United States that need to be considered? And then you get into more of the operational risks. So is there enough management bandwidth to expand into another market? And bear in mind, for our Singapore founders, it's a 12 or 13 hour time difference depending on the time of the year. That doesn't seem like much, but it does put a tax on the management prowess of any company. It takes attention. It's difficult. So you have to consider, do you have the bandwidth to successfully expand and then operate in another market? And then, one of the other considerations that maybe is less obvious, but I think is important is your technology in a sector where US venture capitalists are likely to want to invest in a subsequent round? If you enter the US market, you're probably not going to get a US investor the first moment you enter. But if you can succeed in the US market and land 10, 15, 20 customers and show that there's traction in that market, then when you go for a subsequent round, a Series B, a Series C, a Series D, it's highly likely that you can get a US company, a US venture capital firm to invest. And at that point, you get access to all of that local US VCs network. And that's a powerful growth accelerator if done correctly. So those are the things that I think need to be considered before you make the call whether or not to go. And I would suggest that it's not enough to have one or two checks in the boxes I just mentioned, but you really need to have several, I'd say 4 or 5, to justify expansion into the US. So in summary, look at the TAM. Is the TAM in the United States compelling enough to justify considering moving there? Are you getting organic customer traction, and or are you getting pushed into US subsidiaries by your Asian customers? Is there any significant barrier to entry in the US from a product perspective or a support perspective? Do you have enough management bandwidth to support the move? And then is your tech in an area where US VCs are likely to get excited if you can prove that there's traction in the US market and participate in a subsequent round? So those are the areas to consider and think about before you move to the US. So thank you for watching today. And if you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to what we have to say.